Coming up today on Uncommon Sense, join me as I talk to my co-host, Joe Grabowski, about what he is going to talk about at this year's upcoming Chesterton Conference. Stay tuned. Hello, and welcome to Uncommon Sense, the official podcast of the Society of Gilbert Keith Chesterton. I'm Grettelyn Darkey, your host, and as always, I'm joined with my co-host, Joe Grabowski. Hi, Joe. How are you?
Very well. How are you?
Pretty good. Pretty excited. We are ramping up for our 43rd annual Chesterton Conference this summer. That'll be July 25th through 27th. And Joe is one of our speakers. So we will be interviewing speakers as we get closer to the conference, but we thought it was only fair to start with Joe. So why don't you just take it away, Joe, and give us a little brief a synopsis of what you're going to talk about and give people one more reason to come to the best conference ever.
Sure. Well, as I think most of the viewers, listeners will know, I'm located outside of Philadelphia, in the Philadelphia area. And really, before I came on board full-time with the Society of G.K. Chesterton, I was running my own local society here in Philadelphia for almost a decade now, and having local gatherings. And so I had been pestering Dale for years to bring the conference to Philadelphia. I thought it would be a great thing. And lo and behold, I came on board with the society full time. And this time I didn't bring it up. Dale suggested, he said, Hey, Joe, why don't we have the conference in Philadelphia? That'd be great. So it was like it was his idea. But I said, yeah, that would be great. And we kind of, struggled around for a theme, and the theme of friendship kind of came up. Now there's ample reason for this. As folks know, Philadelphia is famously called the city of brotherly love. Now, kind of a spoiler, it's not maybe for the reasons that you think. It's not that Philadelphia had this reputation as being a place of remarkable fraternity and friendship, but rather the Greek words that make up the term Philadelphia. And there's a city of Philadelphia in the ancient world. It's mentioned in the Bible. It means literally the friendship or love among brothers. Those who are brothers, philos adelphos. So that was the inspiration to name the city. But it did come from an ambition of friendship, as folks may or may not be aware. The state of Pennsylvania was founded by William Penn, and hence the name of Penn's Woods for Pennsylvania. But William Penn also coined the name Philadelphia for the city of Philadelphia, naming that city. And Penn was, of course, a Quaker, or a member of the Society of Friends, as the Quakers are known. And that value on friendship and really on one of the things the Quakers early excelled at in the American experiment was the virtue of religious tolerance and of kind of accepting a religious pluralism more than maybe was the case with many of the other burgeoning colonies. And so that kind of love, despite differences, was sort of the ideals, one of the founding ideals of the whole state of Pennsylvania and of course of the city of Philadelphia. And so that's just a little background on kind of where the theme of the conference comes from. None of that is the substance of my talk. I just wanted to...
That's a freebie.
Yeah, that's a freebie. So this is why we came up with the theme this year of faith and friendship. And we'll have various speakers, speaking to this matter from sundry perspectives. So, for example, Joseph Pierce, our good friend and one of the famous troubadours, Chesterton biographer, but also a biographer of Hilaire Belloc. He'll be speaking about that remarkable friendship between Chesterton and Belloc. So we'll see examples of how friendship was lived out in the life of G.K. Chesterton. We'll hear a little bit about Chesterton's insights on the value and the virtue of friendship. We'll hear about kind of philosophical and religious perspectives on friendship. My talk is going to be focusing, though, on what you might, for lack of a better word, call the crisis of friendship. Now, I'm always reticent. Everything's a crisis nowadays. It's one of these ways that, clickbait journalists very easily get, people to read their articles, or at least click on their articles. So whether it's, this or that economic crisis, or the crisis of devices or phones, or, whatever.
Right.
Everybody likes to speak in terms of crises. However, in this particular case, I don't think that it's merely hyperbole or scaremongering or sensationalistic yellow journalism. I do think that there is a trajectory that we can observe in especially modern society that is worrisome when it comes to how friendship is manifested in our society. So that was kind of the idea. The title of my talk is "Did Zuck Unfriend Us All?" And that's a bit of a bait and switch, because my thesis is going to be that while it's tempting to look at the age of social media as this kind of catalyst for the increased alienation and atomization that we see within society, and people saying that they don't have these real friendships anymore, it's actually a symptom of a much deeper and a much older problem.
Oh, I like that. That sounds interesting. Yeah. Are you going to talk about like toxic tribalism or anything like that, or
Well, right now
another
it's
buzzword?
right now it's a matter of cutting, probably, because I've been doing my research, and I already have too much, so I'm going to be trimming it down and trying to arrive. Right now, it's kind of research in search of a thesis, which is always a terribly dangerous way to conduct research. But I've been reading. Let me pull this over here. This is my kind of temporary working bookshelf. These are just a few of the volumes I've been reading.
Okay.
Some
Nice.
of the viewers and listeners may recognize this. This is sort of a Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam. Is kind of a it's a seminal work in this kind of field of research, at least in the modern period, where he looked at declining interest in joining membership organizations and community, how community was fracturing and everything. And he wrote this originally, he did the research and writing in kind of the late 90s, and I think the book was published in the first edition in the year 2000. So before the iPhone, before Facebook, I mean, I guess you had MySpace back then, but you didn't have these social media influences when he was already describing something's going on here. Similarly, now there's a wave of journalistic and also scholarly research articles being written on how, friendship has been catapulted into crisis by COVID. And there is some truth to that, right? There is truth of the fact that people report having a certain number of friends with whom they would engage and whom they would see regularly before COVID. And then, on average afterwards, you see as much as 60% decline post-COVID. So there has been a huge influence that was made there. But once again, I'm going to kind of trouble the thesis of many modern scholars who kind of look, I think, in the wrong places for, including Putnam, for the wrong places for the explanatory factor. And of course, as a Catholic, it's easy to say, well, it's original sin. That's part of it.
That's very general, though.
Yeah, exactly. It's an easy reductive answer, though. Anytime somebody asks you to explain a troublesome social development, you could at least always defend the answer original sin one way or another. So if you're ever struggling out there, this is just a pro tip for anybody out there. If somebody asks you to kind of give that sort of a talk where to comment on a worrisome trend and you're just struggling to come up with something, pick original sin as your boogeyman, and then just develop that, and you will you will make a compelling argument. I guarantee it.
It's a great explanation to anyone who makes any comment to a toddler too. Well, original sin,
Yeah.
That's great though. I don't want to spoil, but I am very, very interested. Could you tell us like what the thing is, or is that a secret?
Well, no, I'm gonna hint at it though.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a secret. I genuinely haven't fully mapped out how I want to try to connect all of this. But if people have been listening so far to kind of what I'm laying out as what I want to talk about, they might have the question, what does any of this have to do with G.K. Chesterton? And this is not me just speaking to the theme of the conference and then shoehorning in Chesterton when convenient. It really is that I think Chesterton and Belloc had their senses attuned to kind of the roots of what I would call this modern crisis. And the hint is that it has to do a little bit with their social and economic theory. So I think that contra, again, the moderns who say, well, this arose because of COVID, or it arose before that because of Donald Trump, or it arose before that because of the Iraq War, or social media, or before that because of the political gamesmanship in Newt Gingrich's House of Representatives, or before that it was not Whitewater but Watergate. And then people make compelling arguments kind of for all these starting points. Go back, they say it's the baby boomers, they say it was World War II, or maybe it was the way that World War I destroyed the psyche, or maybe before that it was the influx of immigration or suburbanization. And all of these things are part of the soup, right? But if you're trying to get to the roots and explain, there's kind of, I think, a missing factor, because people maybe want to look at this through a bit of a maybe too secularized realm when they're trying to analyze this. And so I do think that Chesterton and Belloc provide us indications of kind of where we, as a whole society, saw the breakup of a particular institution that that had oriented us towards friendship in a important way, and it is the crisis of that institution that I think is really at the roots of everything else we're seeing.
Okay, I'm hooked.
Yeah.
I'll take it. Cool. That's how to ask questions without like just saying, tell me all the thing.
Well, as I said, I'm cutting a lot out from the talk. So,
Sure.
I mean, you could probably ask questions and it won't spoil the talk, because a lot of this is going to end up on the cutting room floor, I'm sure.
Let me just ask a more general question. Then I know, you've been involved in helping to pick this theme for the conference. So maybe this has been in your head for a long time, but how did you get to this topic? Like, what was your inspiration for even talking about this?
Well, yeah, that's it. It does kind of come coincidentally. I mean, I sort of explained how the theme of friendship and faith came up with Philadelphia. That was kind of just as accidental as the naming of Philadelphia, or what have you. So, the theme kind of indicated me to work out these ideas that I'd been having for longer. So it's kind of just nice serendipity, or whatever you want to call it, that I had already been kind of ruminating on these ideas. And really that goes back to my reading of Chesterton and Belloc and people like Father McNabb and the Catholic social teaching over the years, of realizing that there's certain terminology that the church and sons of the church will use that they just kind of take for granted, that are increasingly challenging to grapple with. Terms like the common good, terms like the universal destination of goods, terms even like politics, society. What is a society? And indeed, what is friendship? What is friendship in the classic and Orthodox theological meaning of the term? I think moderns, we tend to think of friendship as, this sort of optative thing where, I have people that are my friends and there's other people that aren't my friends, right? And we maybe draw these distinctions between friendship and acquaintance.
Yeah.
And I think, if you go back all the way to the Sermon on the Mount, you know, friendship is all it is kind of the act of being friends.
Mm.
And you can kind of think, maybe not the Sermon on the Mount, think of the parable of the Good Samaritan and
Mm.
that great question that Jesus asks, because the question that is asked of him is, who is my neighbor? And then he describes this whole story of the men on the side of the road, waylaid by robbers, and the people passing by, and then finally the Samaritan, the priest and the Levite pass by, and then the Samaritan finally helps him out. But then it's kind of odd. The punchline of that parable is I don't know how. Maybe it's just me, but it seems unexpected, right? Because Jesus then asks, "Who was neighbor to the man?"
Mm.
Now, again, remember, he's answering the question, "Who is my neighbor?"
Mm-hmm.
He's not. So, in a certain way, he's reversing the whole structure of what people were inquiring about. He's not saying, well, that man on the side of the road was the neighbor
Mm.
of the priest and the Levite, and they missed him by. He's saying that neighborliness is enacted.
Yeah.
It's sort of
It's like a positive thing.
it's a positive thing.
Yeah.
It's a back and forth too.
Mm.
It's like, who is your neighbor? It's well, everyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a certain sense, it's everyone, and everyone. I would argue in a similar vein, friendship is kind of synonymous in the Christian ethos. Who ought to be my friends? To whom do I behave as a friend? Right?
Mm.
It should be everyone. That's what we're called to as Christians, and
Mm.
we do know this. I think in the back of our minds, right? We use these terminologies, like you tell your children when they're out amongst strangers, be friendly,
Yeah.
right? Be friendly. But for some reason, there's this odd kind of we have these define the relationship
Mm.
algorithms that we work in our minds, where it's like, well, you can be friendly to somebody, but that doesn't mean you're their friend.
Mm.
Well, what else does it mean?
Right.
Yeah.
No,
So
that's interesting. And then, you get Jesus saying, if you're my friends, if you keep my commandments.
mhm,
And then the first commandment is love one another as I have loved you. So,
yeah.
yeah. So the criteria for being God's friend is being other people's friend in the sense of truly loving them, truly having charity for them.
Yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
that's sort of the spoiler, and it's not. It doesn't spoil my talk because it's so obvious that it's not like I could kind of keep this under a hat, or keep it as something I'm going to stun my listeners with. Agapeic love, the call of love in the gospel, charity, Christian charity. These are these are the kernels of what constitutes friendship, and then
Mm.
friendship is really the basic relation of society.
Mm.
We speak a lot of the family as the basic building block of society, and that's true, right? So then what do you call it when you go through this stage where you no longer have just a family, but now there's something that you would call a society
Yeah.
or a community? It's nothing more nor less than friendship.
Mm.
It's the forming of friendships um, between those groups, between those units, or at least that's what it ought to be.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's kind of the artificial thing that a lot of systems are trying to impose. I mean, like the communist comrade, what is that? It's someone who is,
yeah,
shoulder to shoulder with you because blah, blah, blah. But they're just trying to like impose friendship, which you can't do, but they're trying to impose friendship. Yeah, it seems like there's a few systems that way, even our sort of like surface level culture, just be friends, just be kind, whatever, all these little trite phrases, they're trying to make that happen. But
yeah,
without sort of the deep basis that makes it work.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have a move to excuse bad friendship. What I mean by that is that you have another explanatory rubric than the one I just described. So, I grant you that, utopian socialists or whoever it may be, there's all kinds of schemes out there to try to artificially construct friendship, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you also have a certain school of thought that they're not concerned so much with prescription, but they are dedicated to a product of description or of analyzing and evaluating what the phenomenon of friendship is. And they explain it in terms of individuals motivated by self-interest who find it advantageous to enter into situations of mutual cooperation as motivated by the hidden hand of market forces and scarce resource. Like this is another kind of prevailing way of evaluating this. And what it ends up doing is it ends up, as I said, excusing bad friendship. So whereas the socialists try to construct friendship ad hoc, which is impossible, it arises naturally out of human beings called to be social creatures or made as social creatures and then feeling that vocational call out of themselves. So the socialists and the communists are wrong. But then I would also argue that the capitalists, if let's just call them what they are, and I know that we'll get listener feedback about who's a capitalist. I don't know. You tell me.
Please leave us listener feedback.
Yes, please do.
We love that.
podcast@chesterton.org.
Yes.
They could even email me directly. But their way of looking at this, ends up with all of these things that have almost become truisms or almost become conventional wisdom, right? So it's not personal, it's business, right?
Yeah.
And we just accept that. And or people who say never start a business with your friends. Well, so start a business with your enemies? Like again, like what do we mean by that and why? It's to excuse behaving in a certain kind of relationship in a way that is other than friendly. And that's so the moment you stop to think about it, it kind of seems just obvious, but our world is dominated by these sorts of perspectives. So
it's also it's sort of against the idea of just opening up and being vulnerable. I mean, which is hard to do, but is what we're kind of part of what we're called to do as Christians. We're supposed to give ourselves to each other in charity. And that includes being vulnerable, which is friendship. For true friendship, you must be vulnerable. So in order to be friends, you have to put yourself out there. You have to take a risk. And I think a lot of people don't want to do that because they're afraid. So that's part of it too, is that there's these walls we put up, oh, you're my coworker, you're not my friend, you're my whatever, you're not my friend, because it's easier and more safe, sadly, to do things that way. But Christ calls us to more.
Yeah. And, the worrisome thing is that this is reinforced in almost every way of modern life. It's influenced by things like urban planning. It's influenced by things like the way that we use technology. It's influenced by everything from how grocery stores are, how the supply chain works, and again, this is why a lot of this it has to end up inevitably on the cutting room floor, because I can't get through all of this in one talk. But it is a fascinating kind of rabbit hole of research to go down, because one of the things you start to discover is, well, there's multiple things. One is that let's take the Great Generation or the baby boomers even, and what they would report of how many of their friends were coworkers, right? And now shift into our day, and how many people report that now. It's plummeted. It is absolutely plummeted. And what you end up having now is you have these spheres. You have neighbors, and then you have coworkers, and then you have co-parishioners, perhaps, or co-religionists. Then you have maybe associates who are, parents of children who are friends with your kids, but they don't even necessarily get classified as your friends. And then you have your friends, and your friends are like this one little bucket over here. And
Yeah.
it's not friend and blank, friend and fellow soldier, or friend and all these other kinds of relationships. And so,
Interesting.
yeah. And so what society maybe used to look like is, this enmeshed, entrained fabric of all of these different overlapping relationships, where there were a whole bunch of ampersands or plus signs between these relationships that you had. And now what you have instead is a whole bunch of single strands. And the problem with that is, you can take single strands of cord and pull on them real hard and they'll rip apart. But if you take them and all you do is spin them together, and then you pull that, well, now you have a rope. And a rope won't break. So we've kind of unwound the rope into its disparate strands, and then we, not that Chesterton wasn't warning us about this, right? It's his great metaphor of the fence applied. This is just a different way of saying the same thing. People found this thing, they didn't know what it was for, they unwound it. Now we're surprised when it's breaking all over the place.
Yeah. And that does reduce people to a very utilitarian use case. Sorry for use and use, but I mean, it even actually ends up, I think, if you have that sort of mentality, and you're my coworker, you're my priest, you're my whatever, but you're not my friend. It does get into this idea of like, well, you're useful for me in this way, and you're useful for me in this way, and it actually ends up coming down to your special little circle of friends where they're useful to you for entertainment, or they're useful for you for going to sports games with, or whatever. So it does, it's interesting. I never thought about this. I love coming to new realizations, but whenever you start to break down that, like you said, the both and of friendship and whatever the people are useful for, you end up with just the usefulness, which is a very weak thread, even, because you end up, we stop working together, we stop being friends. I go to a different parish, I stop being friends with you. Like, these things just sort of pull apart very easily, like you said, and it leaves a very weak society. Yeah.
Well, and what are friends for? That, I know it's the title of a song, or no, that's what friends are for. Was that like Dion Womack or somebody like that? But anyway,
throwback.
Yeah, this idea of usefulness and utility, it also kind of goes in the opposite direction. This is sort of one of the other crises that has come about in modern society. So friendship's linked to a whole bunch of things. It's linked to mental health. It's also linked to physical health. People with fewer friends die sooner. And that's well attested scientific finding, right? And, we talk about all sorts of reasons why that might be. But the other thing that, in this sense of alienation that people have, there's a chicken and the egg question because while it's true that, of course, people hate to be treated like a utility or a resource or objectified in that way, on the other hand, people do like to be useful.
Yeah.
And one of the things that has happened in modern society is that people find themselves feeling less useful and therefore less of value. And this could be, in the true extremis of the case, where it is genuinely a crisis and frankly a travesty and a sin that cries out to heaven for vengeance, is in the case of those who basically get labeled as useless social in a social wide way, like the elderly, right? So once you cease having these functional meanings that you contribute to society, you're just sort of discarded. You're put in a home, you're ignored. There are staggering and frankly very depressing statistics out there of they looked at elderly, I think over the age of 65, that young, in the United Kingdom. And, they reported seeing possibly one person for less than 1 hour in a whole 7-day period.
Mm.
That's the only other human interaction that they have. It's actually worse in places like Japan, where the society is aging, and Japan came up with this, but here's how it all connects, right? Well, what was Japan's solution? They are trying to use robots, so they invented these humanoid type robots, and now I'm sure they're getting better with AI to stick in these nursing homes so that these old people can have conversations with them and feel some sort of connection. So, but that is sort of a nice little microcosm and a window into the social wide problem of one of the reasons that people feel less useful is because we've unwound the strands, we've separated them from one another, and now your function can always be replaced by some sort of technology or some sort of other more advantageous, more efficient, right? And this is where market ideology also has its flaws, the way that it influences social behavior. You can achieve this more efficiently, so, and think, I know this in my own social circles of how many people who figure, it's just such a hassle to try to get my friends to help me move, so I'll just hire the moving guys, and it's so cheap now, and there's so many competitors in that market, and it's become this kind of industry where it is advantageous to customers, where you can get it for a reasonable price. And you figure, once you factor in the beer and the pizza that you're going to have to give your buddies, and the cost of that, plus the just pain in the neck of asking them and having them say, no, my kid's going to be sick that day. It's just more convenient to go with the moving company. But what do we lose? What do we lose in that? We lose friendship.
And I did hear another podcaster say at one point, if you want to make friends, ask for help. So it's this moment of vulnerability again, where you need something, and not that you should only go to your friends when you need something, but it is a moment where you kind of can give this unique gift of making someone useful. When I had my first child, a friend of mine was like, I'm going to put you on the meal train. And we had dinners. We probably had 24 dinners cooked for us by people we did not know. And they drove to our house and they brought us food. And some of them we became friends with because they were willing to step up and help someone they didn't even know. But the flip side of that is you have to be willing to accept the help. Like you said, it'd be more convenient maybe and you don't get the weird squash soup, whatever, sometimes. But you're having this opportunity for an interaction. You're giving someone the opportunity to engage in charity, which isn't, I mean, we live in a very wealthy and privileged society, and it's a wonderful thing for us, but a lot of people that we know don't need anything. So having the ability even to give, to do an act of charity is kind of a gift in itself.
Yeah. And that again becomes, it becomes a usefulness, but again, we do, for very good reason, kind of balk at that term. We don't like it, right? But but this is sort of where I'm driving with the thesis that I'm going to try to develop, is that even that word has changed. There's a line in the liturgy of the Catholic Mass where the translation that we use, may the Lord accept the sacrifice at your hands for the praise and glory of his name, for our good and the good of all his church. And the way that runs, ad utilitatem et bonum, right? So it's actually for our good and the good of all his holy church. There's two different words for good there. There's utilitatem and bonum. Hello, viewers and listeners. This is an abashed and embarrassed Joe Grabowski interjecting at this point just to clear up any confusion. I was forgetting the original prayers in the Latin here. Actually, there's only one usage in the particular passage I was quoting, it is the usage utilitatem. The distinction I was trying to remember was that utilitatem is used in place of the other Latin word bonus, which is not used in this particular passage. So where good appears twice in the English, in both cases that is drawing from the same Latin word, utilitatem. It is not the case that this prayer contains both words in Latin for good. My apologies. So utilitas, good, to be good for, is a genuine part of goodness that because of the rise of the philosophy of utilitarianism, it becomes sort of it becomes a bad word, and that's just one more thing that from our ancient tradition that we ought to recover and take away from its misuse, because sometimes goodness being a good or a good for others, well, I just said it's unspecified, and you want to know, how can I be good for something?
Yes.
Think about whenever somebody's mourning, right? The that feeling of futility that you have, like, there's, what can I do or say? That shows us that we don't just have this sort of vague, misdirected sense of wanting to be good, or we want to do goods that are good for someone in a particular need. So there's a lot we could go on. As I'm excited to kind of delve into this for the audience, and I hope that it will be it'll be a little bit sobering. It'll be a bit of a shake and a wake up call for people. But the good news is this: I do want to chart how, again, spoiler, the answer is not original sin, right? Because original sin has always been with us, and a lot of the things that I'm describing, there's always this temptation to say, well, our age is uniquely bad, and C.S. Lewis, as well as others, kind of caution against being too quick to say that. Well, this isn't a conclusion that I've arrived at too quickly. I'm going to just come out and say it. Our age is uniquely bad in this particular way. We have arrived at the tail end of a degradation that has now reached a proportion where, like, we really need to turn the ship around.
Yeah.
The good news is that it is the end of a process of degradation. And as Chesterton says in What's Wrong with the World, he's complaining about the modernists, and he says that they're always telling you can't put the clock back. And the simple and obvious answer is, I can. The clock being a piece of human construction, it can be restored by the human finger to any figure or hour, in the same way human society can be restored to any mode that has been previously in existence. And
Amen.
So there are aspects of social restoration that we have in our heritage, in our tradition, in our history, that Chesterton talks about, that Belloc talks about, that the church upholds for us as ideals, that we can recover and bring back and make friendship great again.
I love it. I'd wear that on a hat.
Yeah.
No, but it is also, it's such a hopeful thing, because if you can look at a problem, oftentimes it's helpful, right? You see the problem. Oh my gosh, it's a big problem. But a lot of times we're left thinking, how the heck do I do anything about this? But this is a problem that you can directly turn around just by what you are doing in your life. So, like, this is, I think it's a great topic, and I think it'll be very hopeful and helpful for people. So
I hope so. I hope to plan it well enough that I don't just and don't find myself running over time, where I just set it up with all my bad news, and then wait. I'm waiting to get to the positive part, and Dale rings the gong, and I have to get off stage. That would be unfortunate. Yeah.
Then we'll just be like, well, you got to tune into Common Sense. We'll tell you the end. So
yeah.
No, I'm sure it'll be great. And if you want to come to the conference in Philadelphia and hear Joe's talk and many other wonderful talks that we have lined up, You can visit chesterton.org/conference. And we are actually having an early bird special for pricing right now. So get your ticket now before the prices go up at the end of the month. Come and hear Joe and Dale and lots of other wonderful speakers.
And make friends. That's the other kind of reason that it's just this theme fits. It's advantageous. My talk and the other talks will speak to the value of friendship, but it's sort of like if you went to a shop class and just sat there and listened to lectures, and then you wanted to know, like, well, I want to make a cutting board now that you taught me about how to cut the wood and do a glue up and everything. Well, guess what? This is kind of like that. This is as a conference, this will be both the the training and the practicum, right? So we will give you all these great you'll hear all these great talks about friendship in various ways, but then you'll get to practice out at the afterglow and during the meals and milling around at the vendor hall and things like that. So you will make friends at this conference.
And luckily, we have one of the most friendly conferences in the field. We've have good and on good authority.
That's right.
that it is easy to make friends, and if you can't make friends with anyone else, come on up to me and I'll be your friend. I have no problem with that. Should be careful if I say that, but anyway. Yeah. Well, thank you, Joe. This was really great. I am happy to be your friend, and it's great to have you sort of on as a guest. That was really fun. So thank you.
This was a good conversation. Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you all for listening and watching. Please do leave your angry comments or happy comments or whatever. Hit the bell, the like button. Don't miss an episode, and go make some friends, because as we know, Chesterton is always, always, always better with friends. Thank you, and God bless.